one of the issues that discussing stem cell brings up is the fact that there are limits on it. There are, in the United States, there are fairly stern legal limits on it because there are some religious objections to the use of human stem cells because of the way we normally make them in the laboratory. We take a newly fertilized egg or its first few progeny, and we use that to derive the stem cells. Remember, the stem cells were a little nest of cells inside a very early embryo. And of course, in order to do that, we take the embryo apart. And some religious objections hold that that is killing an incipient human being, and therefore is ethically repugnant. The majority of the people in the United States, I know from polls, do not feel this way. They support stem cell research. The embryos that we use, of course, are typically embryos that have not been used in vitro fertilization. They are simply in a freezer somewhere and will eventually be thrown out because they gradually lose their viability in the storage. Most people don't find that ethically repugnant to use them on behalf of humankind to do medical research. There's another form of pseudo-stem cell that we now can make. The remarkable discovery made just a few years ago, actually by a Japanese scientist who is a part-time member of our faculty, but also has a home and a research lab in Kyoto. This scientist discovered that you could take adult cells, say a skin cell, and treat it with just 4 genes and turn it back into something that resembles a stem cell, an embryonic stem cell. Now, it's not a complete replica of an embryonic stem cell, but it has properties like a stem cell. It can produce various adult tissues, and the people who are concerned about the ethics of embryonic stem cell research would say, well, just use these induced stem cells, as they're called, or I would say kind of pseudo stem cells. Just use those and don't use embryonic stem cells. But since the pseudo stem cell does not fully replicate the embryonic stem cell, and since the embryonic stem cell has these very valuable properties for medical research, most medical scientists in the United States, myself included, believe we have to continue research in parallel on both kinds of cells. And then there's another school of thought that's even more reserved, that says we should just limit ourselves to studying adult stem cells, that if we understood what all the adult stem cells do, we would have a composite of what the embryonic stem cell does, and that's simply not biologically correct. But in the United States, we still have national legislation that very severely constrains stem cell research, and very recently we had a judicial opinion that set us back a bit. I don't know whether that judicial opinion will survive appeal, but it put a hold on, for example, put a hold on new grants from the National Institutes of Health for stem cell research because it had returned us to a former era of even more stringent control than we used to have. So this is an ongoing issue in the United States. I don't dismiss the gravity of the matter at all. I have my own convictions about it, which I've mentioned, as do most biomedical scientists, and we respect the opinion of others. We just, as a society, will work our way through this. I'm fond of pointing out that when in vitro fertilization was first invented and first used in Britain, there was a tremendous public outcry that this was unethical and should never be done. Now it's used to make thousands of new families every year and to gratify the new parents, and no one even thinks about it as being unethical anymore, at least in any advanced society. I think that will eventually happen with stem cell research as well.